dedication, and support. And now to our guest, Michelle Caravella. She's an RDN. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you
Nice
so
to
much.
have you. Could you tell me what RDN means?
Sure. RDN stands for Registered Dietitian Nutritionist. So basically we are the food and nutrition experts in the health field.
Oh, very good. Do you plan the meals for the kitchen, for the patients, or?
We don't plan the meals for the patients. We actually assess and address their nutritional needs and make sure that that's being met while they're in the hospital.
I see. So some people would have special dietary needs that you address.
Correct.
Oh. Well, tell us a bit about yourself and your training.
Sure. So I'm an alumni of James Madison University, where I did my undergraduate study in dietetics, and then I went on to Meredith College in Raleigh, North Carolina to do my postgraduate internship, which was about a year long of supervised nutritional practice.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you became a Southern girl for a while.
For a little while, yep, and then I came back.
Now, well, you kind of told us what you do in Ocean Medical Center. Do you want to expound on that, or?
So for the most part, like I said, we assess most patients' nutritional needs. So there's a certain amount of patients who are considered at nutrition risk when they enter the hospital based on their nutrition history, their medical status. For example, some patients just may have had a stroke or a heart attack or may have had a hip replacement, and we make sure those patients are fed adequately in order to heal and recover.
Actually, I've been in the hospital, unfortunately, a couple of times, and I have had people come to my bedside. That must be what your department does. Is that correct?
Correct, yep.
Good. As we begin a new year, we often set goals to exercise more and eat better. What advice can you give our viewers about maintaining a healthy diet?
Sure. So this time of year, a lot of us are setting our New Year's resolutions, which have a lot to do with either weight loss or exercising more, improving our diets. So my first tip of advice would be to be realistic. So we start really excited and we make these big goals that can be a little bit maybe unrealistic. So you really want to be honest with yourself and see what you can actually achieve. So by being specific and scaling it back a little bit will make your goals more achievable, because most of us forget that it's not just a week or two or a month long. We want to really attain that goal from January to December.
Right. I understand that, because this is the first year I haven't made any resolutions. But I think you do, as you said, have to be realistic. And one of my goals is to slip just a little once in a while per week. In other words, enjoy myself and try to stay on a nutritional diet.
That's great, yeah.
You think that's a good idea?
Yeah, when you start small, like for instance, instead of saying I'm going to eat 3 servings of vegetables every day, maybe you can change that to I'm going to try 1 new vegetable each week, or at least 1 new vegetable each week. That kind of gives you some room to impress yourself rather to disappoint yourself.
That's a very good idea. It's a very positive attitude.
Right.
Rather than don't do.
Exactly.
Good. Many of us want to live healthier. What is the best way to avoid many long-term chronic diseases?
So a lot of long-term or chronic diseases unfortunately have a lot to do, or fortunately have a lot to do with our lifestyle. So the first thing you want to ask yourself is what's on your plate. Every day we eat, so that impact of nutrition really adds up in the long run. So it's important to see, are you eating enough fruits and vegetables and whole grains? Can your diet have a little bit less of that added fat or added sugar? The second thing you want to ask yourself is, how are you staying active? Physical activity is crucial in preventing a lot of these chronic diseases. Obtaining that healthy weight and avoiding excess weight gain really helps keep you in the clear. And lastly, we want to make sure that our stress is managed well. Mental health has a big component in preventing a lot of those chronic diseases.
Oh, that's very interesting. Very interesting. I had a thought and it escaped me, but it'll come back. Over the past couple of decades, serving sizes have increased. It's amazing in some restaurants what they will serve. What is the difference between recommended portion sizes and serving sizes?
Sure. So portion sizes are the actual amount of food we eat. So compared to a serving size, which is typically what's recommended by things like the U.S. Department of Agriculture or dietitians alike. So we want to make sure that we're staying a little bit close to the recommended serving size when we're out at restaurants, that our portion sizes tend to be maybe double, even quadruple of what we're actually should be eating. So over here I have some different food models of some of the different food groups. These here are our proteins, so things like chicken, beef, and fish. Now, a serving size is about 3 or 4 ounces. This is generally speaking. So some people might have different needs than others, but generally speaking, we want our serving of chicken or beef to be about 3 to 4 ounces.
Really? Even the chicken?
Yep, even the chicken.
Because that looks small to me.
Yeah, so believe it or not, this is pretty realistic of what a serving of meat should be.
Interesting.
Yep, and then the same thing with the fish is about the size of your hand because it's a little bit thinner than
Right.
something like beef.
Yes. Well, most hamburgers are about 4 ounces, I would think.
Right,
Yeah.
but sometimes you can go to a steakhouse and you might get an 8 ounce or even
Yes.
bigger than that.
Yes,
So.
you have to be careful. Let's see now. How can you manage portion sizes when eating out or on the run?
So it's actually a little bit easier than you might think to manage how much you're actually eating or your portion sizes. So a quick tool you can use is your hand. So same way I just put the chicken right in the palm of my hand, that's about 3 ounces. So if you're looking at food or you're looking at your plate, you want to think, okay, I'm eating either a hamburger, fish, chicken, whatever your source of protein is. Try to make it look as close to the size of your palm as possible. For other things like, let's say, pasta or mashed potatoes or our carbohydrate starch foods, we want about between a half a cup and a cup. So
Half a cup is very small.
yep, so it's a lot different than what we're used to. But if we want to stay on track, again, everybody's needs are different, but generally speaking, it's about only a half a cup or a cup. So that's about the size of your fist.
I do avoid starches most of the time.
Okay.
If I'm out, I don't, but not bread, but vegetable starches and things I try to avoid. Rarely eat potatoes, even though I love them.
Yeah, potatoes are a great source of potassium, believe it or
Oh,
not.
really?
So that's good for your blood pressure.
Or aren't bananas also?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think I get them. Okay, why is it important to read the food labels at the grocery store?
So the food labels are the facts of what's actually in your food. So everybody might be looking for different things. You might be looking for salt, I might be looking for sugar, but the point is the food labels tells you exactly what's in your food. So on the front of a food product, there might be a claim that this is a low sodium food or a low carbohydrate food. However, if you're not reading the food label and taking note of the serving size, you may be eating a low sodium food, but maybe you're eating 4 times the serving size, so that's no longer low sodium.
I see what you're saying, yeah. Do you have any recommendations for, say, sugar in an item or fat in an item?
Recommendations as far as
The grams. I guess it's grams.
Sure. So the biggest thing you can do is for sugar and even also for fat, you can look on the ingredient list. So the ingredients are listed by weight order. So instead of getting caught up in the numbers, it's really simple if you just go to the ingredient panel and make sure that sugar isn't one of the first 3 ingredients. That kind of assures you.
Oh, I see. So suppose it is. What do you do?
So typically that means that food item has too much added sugar. So things like our common household foods like bread even or pasta or rather cereal, a lot of those foods we may think are healthy, nutritious foods, but they can be very high in added sugar. So trying to find a product that sugar is more on the back end.
Yeah, I read labels all the time. I've been doing it for years. I don't always pay attention, but I try to. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's very important. For instance, if I see sugar, I try not to go over 5. Like I like jellies in the morning on my toast. And sometimes I buy sugar, jelly with sugar in it, and sometimes I just buy the with no sugar.
Okay.
Is that a good idea or no?
Typically, if you can find something like the preserves, like jam or preserves rather than jam, there might be less sugar. So if you can find something with no added sugar, that would be the better option.
Right. So I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. Okay. What is a good rule of thumb for portioning food on your plate?
Sure. So a good rule of thumb is something I like to use is called the My Plate. So this actually replaced the food pyramid back when the USDA.
I remember that, yes. For years, yes.
Yep. So this is kind of the new food pyramid, and I actually like it a little bit better because it's more of a visual that you can always take with you, whether you're dining out or at a friend's house or even if you're at your own home. So what this is it shows you the components that we want to have on our plate and also how much of those foods we want on our plate. So over here, as you could see, half the plate is what I call color or fruits and vegetables. So when we ensure that about half of our plate has this much color on it, we kind of can portion control the rest of our foods, the protein and the grains, which tend to have more calories than our fruits and vegetables. So about a quarter of the plate are our protein, so again, things like chicken, meat, or fish, and then a quarter of our plate are things like our grains, so spaghetti, pasta, potatoes, things of that nature.
Potatoes are considered a grain?
They're considered a starch.
Right. Well, what's the difference between a grain and a starch?
So a grain and a starch are very similar. Potatoes are technically a vegetable, but for the sake of managing your portions, we would count that as more of a whole grain or a grain. Does that make sense, kind of? We wouldn't want half the plate of potatoes, even though technically they're a vegetable. They are more of a starch.
I see what you're saying, yeah. I avoid them almost completely. But, there's always that one time where they're on the plate if you're out where I might have them. But
so all foods can fit as long as we're, of course, unless there's a food allergy, so as long as we're within our portion size.
Do you think it's bad to eliminate starch?
Yes, I do. Yeah, so starch and grains and carbohydrates are our body's main source of fuel. So when we cut that food group out entirely, it really makes it difficult to sustain. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I only do it for with a dinner, so, I'll have my toast in the morning, usually.
Yeah, so again, we kind of want to aim all meals to look like this, to contain some kind of grain or starch at every meal to make sure that we're getting all of the nutrients and calories we need.
What is heart-healthy eating?
Heart-healthy eating is similar to just general healthful eating, so with an emphasis on low sodium, low saturated fat, and an emphasis on added fiber from fruits, vegetables, whole grains, other vitamins and minerals like potassium to kind of help keep our blood pressure in check and our heart from working too hard.
You mentioned saturated fat. Is there a good fat compared to saturated fat?
So there's something called unsaturated fat. So those actually are considered heart healthy, and we find those in foods like fatty fish, so tuna, salmon. We also find them in things like flaxseed, chia seeds, hemp hearts, nuts, avocados, oils. Whereas our saturated fats we tend to find in a lot of our full-fat dairy products, so things like cheese, ice cream, whole milk, baked goods. We also find them in things like fatty meats, so a fattier cut of meat or chicken with the skin still on the meat. those are saturated fats, and we want to limit and avoid those.
So the skin is really part of a saturated fat. I never eat the skin of a chicken.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's best to try to avoid that if possible.
So butter isn't good.
Butter is a saturated fat.
What about low fat butters? Are they any better? For instance, I use Land O'Lake low fat with canola oil.
Yeah, so it might be a little bit better. It's really your definition of what's better, what are you looking for in particular. However, butter is butter, right? It's a fat, so any way you look at it, again, it's all about portion control.
Oh, the next question is what are saturated fats and unsaturated? And I think we covered that pretty good. What are some general guidelines for decreasing fat intake?
So most of our fat intake in America actually comes from dairy. So if you're a big cheese eater or a big milk drinker, you might want to start there. A lot of the time, dairy is a great nutritious food, but if we can choose low fat or fat-free dairy, so skim milk or even 2% milk, and kind of watch out how much ice cream we're eating or how much cheese we're eating. So it's really hard to find a good tasting fat-free cheese. So I would just really recommend watching the portion of the cheese you're eating.
There are a couple, though.
Yeah.
I've been buying organic milk. Is that a 2% organic milk? Is that any better?
Then
Regular, than regular 2% milk.
So organic has a different, it depends again what you're looking for. If you can afford to do organic, then that's great, especially if it's a food that you're most commonly consuming a lot of. However, your regular milk is just as good as the organic milk. So if you can't afford the organic milk, we would still want you to at least get the milk, whether it's organic or not.
And do you recommend any portion per day of milk?
Most people need 2 to 3 servings of dairy. Again, that's generally speaking, so 1 serving would be about 8 ounces. So if all your dairy was coming from milk, that would be 2 to 3 cups.
That's interesting. That's interesting. What are some general guidelines for decreasing fat intake?
As far as the saturated fats?
Well, I would think so, yeah.
So again, it would be the dairy to make sure that how much cheese we're eating. If we're drinking whole milk, we can also look at the meats we're eating. So a lot of highly processed meats, things like sausage, Taylor ham, bacon, even turkey bacon, a lot of those breakfast meats have a lot of saturated fat. Again, that's skin on things like chicken or turkey, any kind of marbling in our meats, like our steaks, the white stuff, that's again saturated fat. So making sure you're really trimming the edges with those types of meat.
So eating beef should be maybe once a week or something.
You don't even have to be that restrictive. If you're purchasing beef, you might want to choose a leaner cut. And again, if we're eating a 3-ounce serving, we might not have to only eat it once a week. So if you're purchasing ground beef, look for something that's 90% lean or greater. So that will ensure to kind of keep some of that saturated fat at bay.
I shouldn't be saying this, but 90 or greater has no taste.
Yeah, so it could be, but filet mignon, well, as long as it's the portion size. Yeah.
Research shows that diet may affect the development of cancer. How can we reduce the risk of getting certain cancers?
So a lot of cancers are associated with added sugar in the diet, not enough fruits and vegetables. So again, just starting simple with the plate, aiming for most of our meals to look like this. Even just if you starting small and you start eating more fruits and vegetables, those have something called phytonutrients in them, and they actually ward off certain diseases. Phytonutrients.
How do you spell that?
That's Phyto.
Oh, almost like photo. Phyto. Very interesting.
Yeah,
Very
so
interesting.
making sure you're getting enough color in your diet and whole grains.
Yeah, I have to work on the color.
Yeah.
For people around here, I go to Aldi's all the time.
I love Aldi's.
For vegetables and fruits. It's unbelievable. They're very good, they're very reasonable. So I recommend that to people in our audience.
Sure, and a great way to make sure that you can have produce in your diet without worrying for it going bad is buying frozen fruits and vegetables, so you always have them on hand, or even canned fruits and vegetables.
Yes, and you can get the can in fruit juice rather than sugar. I do that on occasion. And also applesauce is very good. You can get the unsweetened applesauce, which
Exactly.
is very good. You did mention photochemicals. And what are some of the foods high in photochemicals? Can you repeat that again?
Sure, so actually all plant-based foods have some degree of phytochemicals, or also known as phytonutrients. So anything, any fruit and vegetable, even beans, whole grains, any plant-based food has a phytochemical in them. So those are those protective components of our plants that if we keep those in.
What about root vegetables?
Yep, root vegetables as well. So typical rule of thumb is the richer the color of a fruit and vegetable, typically the more nutrients or the more nutritional benefits that fruit and vegetable has. So something like beets or red peppers or green peppers tend to be a little bit more nutritious.
Very good. Well, I think we just about covered everything. Nutritional information can seem complex and overwhelming and varies depending on age, gender, and health status. What should our viewers do if they have questions about their individual needs?
So I would recommend that if all viewers could meet with a registered dietitian, that they should. I think it's invaluable. Of course, I am a little bit biased, but there are a lot of dietitians who actually do take insurance. Ocean Medical Center has an outpatient facility, so if they call the hospital or if they go online, they can find a dietitian and possibly meet up with or schedule an appointment. They can also visit www.eatright.org and click on Find an Expert, and you can punch in your zip code there and find local dietitians in the area. It's truly the best way to get all your answers or all your questions answered.
And you say that could be covered with insurance?
Yes.
If someone were to call the hospital, it would be covered with insurance?
Depending on your medical history
Obvious.
and what your insurance is.
Right, but there is a good possibility
Sure.
that would happen. Very good. Well, I think we've covered just about everything, Michelle. Delighted to have you. Do you have any
Thank you so much.
additional comments? I think we've covered a lot.
I think we did. Just for everyone at home, just to stay realistic with their New Year's resolutions, and it's a journey. We have to eat for the rest of our lives, so
Right.
don't be too hard on yourself, and visit a dietitian if you have any more questions.
Well, that's wonderful, and I appreciate your coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.